He built the stage on which Hitler's empire stood. Albert Speer turned architecture into power and rose to the top of the Nazi state. At Nuremberg, he accepted blame but claimed ignorance, shaping the myth of the good Nazi. Was he truly unaware or simply unwilling to see? Albert Speer was born on March 19, 1905 in Mannheim, a prosperous city in southwestern Germany. The second of three sons, he grew up in a wealthy family of architects. His father, Albert Friedrich Speer, ran a respected architectural firm, and his mother, Louisa, encouraged her sons toward culture and refinement. Speer followed the family path, studying architecture first at the University of Karlsruhe, then at Technical University of Munich, and finally in Berlin under the renowned neoclassicist Heinrich Tessenow. By his mid-20s, he had established himself as a technically skilled but conventional designer, not yet touched by politics. That changed in 1931. Germany was in crisis, mass unemployment, political street fights, and disillusionment with the Weimar Republic. A colleague invited Speer to hear a speech by Adolf Hitler. The 26-year-old architect later recalled being swept away by the energy and certainty he felt that day. Within weeks, he applied for membership in the Nazi Party, receiving his card on March 1, 1931, number 474481. It was a quiet decision, but one that would define his life. Speer's first political commissions came swiftly. He redesigned offices for Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry and helped organize rally spaces in Berlin. By early 1933, the Nazis seized power. Speer was already working on large-scale projects for the new regime. He was tasked with coordinating venues for rallies and parades. Architectural theater meant to project unity and strength. In 1934, Speer's rise accelerated. When Hitler dismissed his old mentor, Paul Trust, the young architect was chosen to complete the new Reich Chancellery and oversee the redesign on party rally grounds in Nuremberg. It was there that Speer designed one of the most iconic spectacles of the Nazi era, the Zeppelinfeld Stadium, with its monumental granite stands and the Cathedral of Light, an array of 130 anti-aircraft searchlights forming vast vertical columns. The imagery was unmistakable: power, order, destiny. Speer's ability to translate ideology into architecture made him indispensable. Hitler, himself a failed art student, admired Speer's taste and precision. Their relationship deepened into mutual fascination. The dictator saw in him a man who could give physical shape to his visions of imperial grandeur. By 1937, Speer was appointed General Building Inspector for Berlin, granted extraordinary powers to redesign the capital into Germania, a world capital of marble boulevards and colossal domes. The position gave him near-dictatorial control over the city's planning. It also placed him directly inside the machinery of the regime. Negotiating demolitions, seizing property, and displacing Jewish residents from Berlin's central districts, many of those expelled would later perish in deportations. By 1939, Albert Speer was no longer just an architect. He was one of the most trusted men in Hitler's inner circle. In February 1942, tragedy and opportunity collided. Fritz Todt, head of Germany's armaments and construction ministries, died suddenly in a plane crash after visiting Hitler's Eastern Front headquarters. Within hours, the Führer appointed Albert Speer as his successor, Reich Minister of Armaments and Munitions. At 36, Speer had vaulted from architect to one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Hitler's choice surprised many senior officials. Speer was not a soldier or an engineer of war, but he had what Hitler prized most: loyalty, efficiency, and an ability to deliver results without question. The new minister inherited a chaotic system: rival agencies competing for materials, redundant orders, and poor coordination between the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Germany was fighting a two-front war it could barely sustain. Speer moved quickly. He centralized control, cut through bureaucratic rivalries, and demanded accountability from generals and industrialists alike. Within months, he merged the once fragmented offices of munitions production into a single authority under his command. He standardized designs, simplified logistics, and exploited mass production. By his own reports, aircraft output doubled, and tank and gun production rose even as Allied bombing intensified. The press hailed an armaments miracle. Behind the numbers lay exploitation on a vast scale. Speer's so-called armaments miracle relied on millions of foreign and captive workers, a truth that would only surface after the war. Still, Speer's status grew. In September 1943, his ministry was renamed the Reich Ministry for Armaments and War Production. He now controlled production for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, essentially directing the industrial heartbeat of Nazi Germany. Hitler saw him daily and granted near total autonomy. Speer's calm, methodical demeanor made him appear rational amid chaos. Even as Germany's military situation worsened, he kept the factories running, often boasting that production reached its peak in 1944, long after defeat was certain. He cultivated the image of a capable administrator, not a fanatic, but a modern professional. His ministry's records, however, reveal a ruthless pragmatism. He signed off on requests for more camp labor, oversaw construction projects staffed by prisoners, and negotiated directly with Himmler for manpower. Some historians describe Speer as Hitler's house genius, a man who fused engineering and ideology to sustain total war. By early 1945, Speer's influence was immense. He managed not only armaments, but also transportation, fuel, and communications. Yet as the Reich collapsed, he sensed the end approaching. Speer claimed later that he had secretly sabotaged Hitler's scorched earth orders, which would have destroyed Germany's infrastructure before Allied occupation. Whether that act was moral rebellion or post-war self-preservation remains one of the enduring debates of his story. By the time Berlin fell, Albert Speer had outlived nearly every other figure of Hitler's inner circle. He was arrested by Allied forces in May 1945, not as an anonymous bureaucrat, but as the man who kept the war machine running long after defeat was inevitable. When Allied investigators began examining Germany's war industries in 1945, Albert Speer's name was everywhere. His signature appeared on orders for labor, construction, and weapons programs that spanned the entire Reich. Yet in his first interrogations, Speer presented himself not as a war criminal, but as a remorseful administrator, a man who had served his country, not ideology. It was a performance that would define his legacy for decades. Speer admitted moral responsibility for the regime's crimes, but he insisted he had known nothing about the persecution of Jews or the conditions in concentration camps. "I was blind by choice," he would later write, a line that became central to his post-war image as the lone Nazi with a conscience. Behind that image lay a far more complicated reality. His armaments miracle depended on millions of forced laborers supplied through Fritz Sauckel, the Reich Labor Commissioner, who organized deportations from occupied Europe. Many of these men and women were assigned to factories under Speer's control through SS labor offices, working in inhuman conditions in camps like Mauthausen and Buchenwald. By 1944, his ministry controlled roughly 14 million workers, of whom about 5 million were foreigners or prisoners. Speer visited Mauthausen in March 1943, inspecting facilities where thousands of prisoners toiled under lethal conditions. Surviving records show that he praised the efficiency of the granite quarry and proposed expanding output for his construction projects. His later claim that he was unaware of the atrocities is contradicted by eyewitnesses and documents linking his ministry directly to SS labor offices. In public, however, Speer was careful to distance himself from the party's ideology. He portrayed himself as a modern man trapped in a medieval regime, a victim of Hitler's charisma. His 1969 memoir, Inside the Third Reich, painted an intimate but sanitized portrait of life inside Hitler's circle, critical enough to appear honest but selective enough to preserve his image. Historians have since dismantled that narrative. Archival evidence shows that Speer attended key meetings discussing the final solution, including the 1943 Posen Conference, where Himmler spoke about the regime's solution for Europe's Jewish population. He may not have signed the orders himself, but his ministry profited directly from the same system of exploitation. As historian Martin Kitchen wrote, Speer's genius was not in architecture or production, it was in self-deception. When the Nuremberg trials opened in November 1945, Albert Speer was one of the most surprising figures in the dock. Between men in tattered uniforms and hardened ideologues, he appeared calm, intellectual, and cooperative. Charged with war crimes and crimes against humanity, Speer was accused of exploiting millions of forced laborers, sustaining Germany's war effort long after its defeat was certain. From the start, Speer's strategy was clear: distinguish himself from the others. While Hermann Göring blustered and Rudolf Hess muttered, Speer spoke with composure and reason. "I share the general responsibility for everything that happened," he told the tribunal, "but not the specific guilt." It was a calculated duality, the same moral distance he would maintain later in Spandau. The prosecution presented documents showing his ministry's reliance on forced labor programs, evidence that undercut his claims of ignorance. Yet his composure and apparent remorse contrasted sharply with his peers. Even British interrogators called him the only decent man among them. On October 1, 1946, the tribunal found Speer guilty on 2 counts: war crimes and crimes against humanity. Unlike many others, he was spared the death penalty. The judges cited his acceptance of moral guilt as a mitigating factor and sentenced him to 20 years in prison. In July 1947, Speer was sent to Spandau prison in Berlin with 6 other Nazi leaders. He imposed on himself a strict routine of reading, writing, gardening, and endless walks in the yard, pacing out imaginary distances for hours. During those 2 decades, he filled dozens of notebooks with reflections and observations. Nearly 10 years after his release, these writings were published in 1975 as Spandau, The Secret Diaries, portraying a man seeking redemption through introspection, a tone that appealed to a post-war audience eager for understanding rather than horror. Released on October 1, 1966, exactly 20 years after his sentencing, Speer re-entered a Germany transformed by defeat and reconstruction. He gave interviews, lectured, and re-established himself in public life. 3 years later, he published Inside the Third Reich, expanding the self-image he had already begun to shape during his trial. For nearly a decade, his image as a repentant official went largely unchallenged. Over time, however, historians dismantled that illusion. Newly released archives revealed that Speer had been present at meetings where the use of Jewish labor was discussed and had corresponded with SS officials responsible for deportations. His remorse, they concluded, was selective, genuine perhaps in tone but hollow in substance. The writer Joachim Fest, who once helped edit his memoirs, later admitted that Speer's confessions were half-truths told with a full conscience. Albert Speer died of a stroke on September 1, 1981 in London, where he was meeting a journalist to discuss yet another book. His ashes were buried quietly in Heidelberg. Today, his legacy remains a warning: how intellect and ambition, when stripped of conscience, can turn complicity into architecture and guilt into myth. Thanks for watching. Watch our other videos for more on the figures who shaped World War II. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more History Inside, and we'll see you in the next one.